Some people have a legitimate reason to feel depressed, but not me. I just woke up one morning feeling arbitrarily sad and helpless. It's disappointing to feel sad for no reason. Sadness can almost be pleasantly indulgent if you have a way to justify it. You can listen to sad music and imagine yourself as the protagonist in a dramatic movie. But my sadness didn't have a purpose. Listening to music and imagining that my life was a movie just made me feel kind of weird because I couldn't really get behind the idea of a movie where the character was sad for no reason. Essentially, I was being robbed of my right to feel self-pity, which is the only redeeming part of sadness. So I tried to force myself not to be sad. Stop it. Stop being sad. Right now. Stop. Get up. Trying to use willpower to overcome depression is like a person with no arms trying to punch themselves in the face until their arms grow back. A part of the plan was missing and just wasn't gonna work. When I couldn't will myself not to be sad, I became frustrated and angry. In a final, desperate attempt to regain power over myself, I turned to shame as a sort of motivational tool. Hey, are you crying? Why are you crying? Did you know some people have pets that are dead? And some people have diseases and tumors? The worst thing that has happened to you is tearing the spout on your chocolate milk. But since I was depressed, this tactic was less inspirational and more of just a way to oppress myself with hatred. Maybe I'll go outside today. No. I hate myself too much. Which made me more sad and more frustrated and abusive until the only way to express my sadness was to crawl very slowly across the floor. I followed myself around like a bully, narrating my thoughts and actions with a constant stream of abuse. Looks like somebody likes pasta. How original. When you were a child, is this what you dreamed of becoming? A sad person holding a fork? Well, good job, fork grabber. You did it. Try not to cry in your pasta. Do you want to play a game? It's called Stand in a Corner and Look Stupid. Ready? You win! Slowly, my feelings began to shrivel up. The few that managed to survive just staggered around like a wounded baby deer, just biding their time until they could die and join all the other carcasses strewn across the wasteland of my soul. I couldn't even muster up the enthusiasm to hate myself anymore. Hey there, typity hands, just typing some words in the dark by yourself? That's neat. You should... What if... Whatever, do what you want. I just drifted around, completely unsure of what I was feeling or if I could feel anything at all.
I feel like a computer.
If my life was a movie, the turning point in my depression would have been inspirational and meaningful. It would have involved wisdom-filled metaphors about finding my true self, and I would conquer my demons and go on to live out the rest of my life in happiness. Instead, my turning point mostly hinged upon the fact that I had rented some movies and didn't return them for too long. The late fees had reached a point where the injustice of paying any more than I already owed outweighed my apathy. I considered just keeping the movies and never going to the video store again, but then I remembered I still wanted to rewatch Jumanji. I put on some clothes, put the movies in my backpack, and biked to the video store. It was the slowest, most resentful bike ride ever. When I arrived, I found that they didn't even have Jumanji in. Just as I was debating whether or not I should settle on a movie that wasn't Jumanji, or go home and stare in abject silence, I noticed a woman looking at me weirdly from a couple rows over. She probably thought I looked really, really depressed, and I was dressed like an Eskimo vargent. Normally, I would have felt an instant crushing sense of self-consciousness, but instead, I felt nothing. I've always wanted to not care. To be one of those dudes whose emotions consist of rock music and not being afraid of spiders. And finally, after a lifetime of feelings and anxiety and more feelings, I didn't have any feelings left. I had spent my last feeling being disappointed that I couldn't rent Jumanji. I felt invincible. Judge me all you want, lady. I don't have feelings anymore. And thus began a tiny rebellion. I can do anything. Maybe I'll rent a horror movie. Maybe I'll rent 6 horror movies. Then I swooped out of there like Batman and biked home in a blaze of defiant glory. Who knows? Maybe I'll touch a spider later. And that's how my depression actually broke through the other side and became a sort of fear-proof exoskeleton. Nothing can do anything to me! At first, the invulnerability that accomplished the detachment was exhilarating. At least, as exhilarating as something could be without involving real emotions. I feel nothing. The beginning of my depression had been nothing but feelings, so the emotional deadening that followed was a welcome relief. However, it soon became apparent that there's a huge difference between not caring and not being able to care. Which leads to soul-decaying boredom. I wonder what today is gonna be like. Oh, nothing. Again. Okay. Months oozed by, and I gradually came to accept that maybe enjoyment was not a thing I get to feel anymore. I didn't want anyone to know, though. I just thought that the whole thing would spontaneously work itself out before I accidentally alienate people. However, I could no longer rely on genuine emotion to generate facial expressions. And when you have to spend every social interaction consciously manipulating your face into shapes that are only approximately the right ones, alienating people is inevitable.
So I did that triathlon the other day.
How do I make the face for yay? Am I doing it? I hope I'm doing it.
Somebody had a heart attack and drowned.
Uh-oh. Sad face. Sad face.
Yeah, can you believe that?
I'm doing the wrong face. I'm sure of it. Oh, well.
What are you doing?
Interacting with you? But people want to help, so they try harder to make you feel hopeful and positive about the situation. You explain it again, hoping they'll try a less hope-centric approach, but re-explaining your total inability to experience joy inevitably sounds kind of negative. Like maybe you want to be depressed. So the positivity starts coming out like a spray. like a giant, desperate happiness sprinkler pointed directly at your face. And it keeps going on like that until you're trying to convince the person that you are far too hopeless for hope, so that maybe they'll give up on their happiness crusade and let you go back to being bored and lonely by yourself.
We should do yoga while watching the sun rise. It's impossible to feel negative or sad when watching the wonders of the universe.
And that's the most frustrating thing about depression. It isn't always something you can fight back with hope. It's not even something, it's nothing. And you can't combat nothing. You can't cover it up, you can't fill it, it's just there, pulling the meaning out of everything. It would be like having a bunch of dead fish, but no one around you will acknowledge that the fish are dead. Instead, they offer to help you look for the fish, or help you figure out why they disappeared.
What's wrong?
My fish are dead?
Don't worry. I'll help you find them. Do you have any clues of where they're at?
I know where they are, the problem is they're not alive anymore.
Let's keep looking, though. I'm sure they're tied up somewhere.
No, that solution is for a far different problem than the one I have. The problem might not even have a solution, but you're not necessarily looking for solutions. You're maybe just looking for someone to say, "Wow, those are super dead. I still like you, though."
Fish are always deadest before dawn.
Have you tried feeding them?
You used to have so many fish. What happened?
What about bees? Do you like bees?
I know! We should get together over the weekend and make happy little finger puppets out of them.
Why not just make them be alive again?
Why can't anyone see how dead these are? I started spending more time alone.
It's okay, Fish. It's gonna be okay.
Somehow I managed to convince myself that everything was still under my control, right up until I noticed myself wishing that nothing loved me, so I wouldn't feel obligated to keep existing. It's a strange moment when you realize you don't want to be alive anymore. I had spent the vast majority of my life actively attempting to survive. Ever since my most distant single-cell ancestor squiggled into existence, there's been this unbroken chain of things that wanted to stick around. Yet, there I was, just casually wishing I could stop existing, in the same way that you'd want to leave an empty room or mute an unbearably repetitive noise. That wasn't the worst part, though. The worst part was deciding to keep on going. From where I am now, deciding not to kill myself seemed like a solid enough decision. But at the time, I felt like I had been dragging myself through the most miserable, endless wasteland, and far off in the distance, I had just seen the promising glimmer of a slightly less miserable wasteland. And just when I thought that I could stop and rest, I found out that I'd have to turn around and walk back the other way. Soon afterwards, I discovered that there's no tactful or comfortable way to inform people that you might be suicidal. There's definitely no way to ask for help casually. Knock knock joke? Knock knock, who's there? Suicide, suicide who? Me, I want to be dead! No, too casual. Yell, then run away?
Hey, what's up?
Class?
Oh, you know.
I might do something bad to myself. Pros, don't have to be there for the fallout. Cons, confusing and alarming. No, I didn't want it to be a big deal. However, it's an alarming subject. Trying to be nonchalant about it just makes it weird for everyone. Hey. I was also terribly unprepared for the position of comforting people. No, see, I don't necessarily want to kill myself. I just want to become dead somehow. Shh, it's okay, life is meaningless anyway. I'm really sorry, can I get you some juice or something? I had so few feelings, and everyone around me had so many. I didn't really know what to do, so I agreed to see a doctor so that everyone would stop having all their feelings at me. If I go see a doctor, will you stop making that noise?
Yes.
Okay. I was prescribed medication. Working so hard to continue doing something you don't like can be a bit overwhelming. The longer it takes to feel different, the more it starts to feel like everything might actually be hopeless. What if the entire world was only made up of horrible, boring things? That would be too many. My feelings did start to return eventually, but not all of them came back, and they didn't arrive symmetrically. I had not been able to care for a long time, and when I finally started to be able to care about things again, I hated them. But hatred is technically a feeling, and my brain latched onto it like a child learning a new word.
Look at them, they just got married. Oh my god. No one's blank. Okay.
Hating everything made all the positivity and hope even more unbearable. The syrupy, oversimplified optimism started to sound almost offensive.
I know exactly how you feel. Vulnerable. Delicate. As if you'll crumble at any moment. Stay strong. It gets better.
Thankfully, I rediscovered crying just before I got sick of hating things. I call this emotion crying and not sadness because that's all it really was, just crying for the sake of crying. My brain had partially learned how to be sad again, but it took the feeling out for a joyride before it learned how to use the brakes or steer.
Hey, is that juice?
Yeah.
Why are you crying?
I don't know. It's just something that's happening. At some point during this phase, I was crying pointlessly on the kitchen floor. As was common practice during bouts of floor crying, I was staring straight ahead at nothing in particular and feeling sort of weird about myself. Then, through the film of tears and nothingness, I spotted a tiny, shriveled up piece of corn under the refrigerator. I don't claim to know why this happened, but when I saw that piece of corn, something snapped within me. And then that thing twisted through a few permutations of logic that I don't understand and produced the most confusing bout of uncontrollable and debilitating laughter that I have ever experienced. My brain had apparently been storing every unfelt scrap of happiness from the last 19 months, and it had impulsively decided to unleash it all at once in what would appear to be an act of vengeance. It was as if my brain went, "You want to be happy? Fine, I'll make you happy to death." That piece of corn is the funniest thing that I have ever seen, and I can't explain why it's funny. If someone ever asks me when was the exact moment when things started to feel slightly less awful, instead of telling them this nice, heartwarming story about the people who loved me and believed in me, I'm going to have to tell them about this piece of corn. And then I'm going to have to try and explain that, no, really, it was funny. Because, see, the way it was sitting on the floor and it was so alone and it was just sitting there. And no matter how many times I explain it, I'll always get the same confused look. So then, maybe I'll try to show them the corn to see if they get it. And they won't. Things will just get even weirder.
Look at how tiny and shriveled it is! Why aren't you laughing yet?
Anyway, I wanted to end this on a hopeful, positive note, but that didn't work out too well. So I'll just say this. Nobody can guarantee that it's going to be okay. But, and I don't know if this will be comforting to anyone else, the possibility exists that there's a piece of corn on a floor somewhere that will make you just as confused about why you were laughing as you have ever been about why you were depressed. I don't know, but when you're concerned that the miserable, boring wasteland might stretch into forever, not knowing feels strangely hope-like.